You've been lied to about the first Americans. Everything you learned in school about Native American history, the simple hunter-gatherers, the primitive societies, the inevitable conquest, it's a carefully constructed myth. What if I told you that beneath the soil of North America lies evidence of advanced civilizations that rival ancient Egypt? What if the Native Americans possessed knowledge that threatened the very foundation of Western civilization? Knowledge so dangerous it had to be systematically erased from history. This is the story of the First Nations, but not the version you know. This is about the megalithic structures hidden in plain sight, the mathematical precision that shouldn't have existed, the astronomical knowledge that predates European discoveries by thousands of years, the medicine that modern science is only now beginning to understand. What really happened to the mound builders? How did the Hopi know about distant galaxies invisible to the naked eye? Why were millions of artifacts systematically destroyed in the 19th century? And most disturbing of all, why does the Smithsonian have vaults of Native American artifacts that the public has never seen? Tonight, we're going to uncover what might be the greatest cover-up in human history. Because once you see the evidence, you'll understand why they had to make you believe Native Americans were primitive. The truth would rewrite everything. In 1883, a government ethnologist named Cyrus Thomas was given an impossible task: prove that the massive earthen mounds scattered across America were not built by an advanced ancient civilization. The government needed him to prove that Native Americans were incapable of such architectural feats. Why? Because if Native Americans had built advanced civilizations, it would destroy the legal justification for manifest destiny. Thomas spent years excavating mounds, finding copper plates with unknown writing, perfectly preserved fabrics that shouldn't exist, and astronomical alignments that defied explanation. But here's where it gets strange. His final report concluded exactly what the government wanted. The artifacts, they vanished. The copper plates, never seen again. Thomas himself? He spent his final years in isolation, reportedly haunted by what he'd discovered and been forced to hide. But Thomas made one mistake. He kept personal journals that wouldn't surface for over a century. And when they did, they revealed something that changes everything we thought we knew about pre-Columbian America. Let's start with what they can't hide: the physical evidence that's too massive to destroy. Cahokia, a city that housed 20,000 people at its peak, larger than London at the same time. With pyramids that rival those in Egypt, Monk's Mound, the largest earthen structure in the Americas, perfectly aligned to true north, built with mathematical precision that required advanced engineering knowledge. But Cahokia is just the beginning. Across North America, there are over 100,000 mounds. Think about that number, 100,000 engineered structures. And we're told these were built by simple societies? The Hopewell culture created geometric earthworks visible only from the air, perfect circles, squares, and octagons spanning hundreds of acres. The Newark earthworks in Ohio encode the 18.6-year lunar cycle with such precision that modern astronomers are stunned. How do you encode advanced astronomical data into Earth monuments without mathematics, without writing, without the instruments we're told they didn't have? Then there's the medicine wheels, stone structures across the Great Plains that mark celestial events with pinpoint accuracy. The Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming aligns with the summer solstice sunrise and the rising points of the brightest stars. Stars that were used for navigation. Stars that told them when to plant, when to harvest, when to hold ceremonies. This wasn't primitive. This was sophisticated astronomical science. But wait, it gets stranger. Let's talk about what was found inside these mounds before the artifacts conveniently disappeared. First, the Michigan copper culture. Native Americans were mining copper in the Great Lakes region 7,000 years ago. Not just mining, they were creating the purest copper artifacts in the ancient world. Copper so pure it didn't need smelting. They extracted over 500,000 tons of copper. Where did it all go? Most of it vanished. But here's the thing. Copper artifacts matching the chemical signature of Michigan copper have been found in Europe and the Middle East from the Bronze Age. Second, the stone chambers of New England. Hundreds of sophisticated stone structures that archaeologists insist were just root cellars built by colonists. Except they're aligned to celestial events. They match construction techniques found in Ireland and Scotland from 5,000 years ago. And they're built on sites Native Americans considered sacred for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. Third, the Windover Archaeological Site in Florida. Bodies preserved in peat for 8,000 years. With brain tissue intact, DNA analysis revealed something shocking. These ancient Americans had genetic markers found in no modern populations. They were different, and their burial practices showed a level of spiritual sophistication that challenges everything we've been told about primitive peoples. Fourth, the oral traditions. The Hopi speak of emerging from previous worlds, of global catastrophes, of star beings who taught them civilization. The Cherokee tell of coming from the stars, from the Pleiades specifically. The Lakota describe underground tunnels connecting sacred sites across continents. Myths or memories? Fifth, the linguistic evidence. Native American languages show connections that shouldn't exist. Similarities to ancient Hebrew, to Japanese, to Celtic languages. The Micmac writing system uses symbols identical to ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Coincidence? Or evidence of ancient contact we're not supposed to know about? But critics weren't convinced. Mainstream archaeologists dismiss these connections as pseudoscience. They say the mounds were simple burial sites. The astronomical alignments? Coincidence. The copper mining? Exaggerated. The artifacts that disappeared? Never properly documented in the first place. They point to the lack of written records. No wheels, no beasts of burden. How could advanced civilizations exist without these basic technologies? They say the oral traditions are just myths, stories that grew in the telling. The linguistic similarities are cherry-picked, they claim, our minds finding patterns where none exist, and most damning of all, where are the cities? Where are the roads? Where's the evidence of the massive populations needed to build these monuments? Surely, they argue, if advanced civilizations existed, we'd find more than just mounds and myths. But what if the skeptics were wrong? What if they're looking for the wrong kind of evidence? You see, there was one thing they didn't count on: the Great Dying. When Europeans arrived, diseases killed 90% of the native population. Imagine 90% of everyone you know vanishing within a generation. Entire civilizations collapsed overnight. Cities abandoned. Knowledge systems destroyed. What would be left? But here's what the critics can't explain. The early explorer accounts. De Soto described cities with walls, temples, and nobility. French explorers wrote about Native American towns with thousands of residents, sophisticated government systems, and trade networks spanning the continent. These weren't the observations of primitive peoples. And then there's the DNA evidence that emerged in 2018, ancient remains from the Amazon showing that massive civilizations existed there, civilizations that transformed the entire rainforest. The pristine wilderness was actually a managed garden, a garden that could support millions. But now we need to address what indigenous elders have been saying all along. What if the Native Americans didn't build these monuments alone? Across tribes, from the Hopi to the Cherokee to the Ojibwe, there are consistent stories of the Star People, beings who came from the sky, who taught them agriculture, astronomy, medicine, who helped them build, who interbred with them. The Zuni speak of the Kachinas, beings who came from the stars and lived among them, teaching them the ways of civilization. The Cherokee tell of the Nanahi, the immortal beings who could appear and disappear at will, who lived in underground cities, who helped them in times of need. And here's where it gets uncomfortable for mainstream science. The elongated skulls found in Native American burial sites, not cranial deformation. These skulls have different bone structure, larger cranial capacity. The Star Child skull found in Mexico, with bone thickness half that of normal humans and fibers unknown to science woven throughout. What if the reason Native American DNA is so unique, showing markers found nowhere else on Earth, is because they're not entirely from Earth? What if the advanced knowledge, the impossible monuments, the astronomical precision, what if it was taught? What if Native Americans are the hybrid descendants of human and something else? The patterns are too consistent to ignore. The Dogon of Africa knew about Sirius B, invisible without telescopes, just like the Cherokee. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the Dreamtime and emergence from other worlds, just like the Hopi. The ancient Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki who came from the stars, just like Native American Star People stories. The pyramid builders of Egypt, the monument builders of Peru, the mound builders of North America, all encoding the same astronomical knowledge, all building with the same impossible precision, all telling stories of teachers from the stars. The Hopi prophecies speak of the blue star Kachina, whose appearance will signal the end of the fourth world. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of Nibiru, a blue star whose return brings catastrophe. The book of Revelation describes wormwood, a star that falls to earth. Different cultures, same story, same warning. And then there's the mathematical constant, phi, the golden ratio. It's encoded in the pyramids of Egypt. It's in the spiral of the Milky Way. And it's in the dimensions of Native American mounds. A universal constant that suggests a universal teacher. What if we lost our true history in a single catastrophic event? Native American oral traditions are consistent on this point. There was a great flood, a time when the earth turned over, when the stars fell, when their advanced ancestors were nearly wiped out. The Younger Dryas, 12 to be 800 years ago, a cosmic impact that ended the Ice Age overnight, that raised sea levels by 400 feet, that buried entire civilizations under miles of mud and water. The black mat layer found across North America, a distinct geological layer filled with nanodiamonds, evidence of a massive cosmic impact. What if the mounds, the oral traditions, the star knowledge, what if these are the remnants, the fragments saved by survivors? What if Native Americans aren't primitive peoples at all, but the descendants of an advanced civilization that was nearly erased from existence? The evidence is there. Underwater structures off both coasts, ancient shorelines with carved stones now 400 feet underwater, the Bimini Road, the structures off Cuba, all at depths that were dry land before the Younger Dryas. What knowledge was lost? What technology vanished beneath the waves? What if the Native Americans who survived retained only fragments? Enough to build monuments, to track the stars, to remember the teachers, but not enough to rebuild what was lost. Modern science dismisses it all. Geologists say the mounds are natural formations modified by humans. Archaeologists insist the astronomical alignments are coincidental. Geneticists claim the unique DNA markers are just founder effects from small populations. They say the Younger Dryas was just climate change. The underwater structures are natural geology. The elongated skulls are all cranial deformation. The artifacts that disappeared never existed. The oral traditions are just stories. But if this never existed, why do so many tribes tell the same stories? Why do the Algonquin in the north and the Maya in the south both speak of coming from a land that sank beneath the waves? Why do tribes that had no contact for thousands of years share identical constellation stories? Why do the prophecies align? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. What if there's a more logical yet still revolutionary explanation? Consider this. What if Native Americans represent an entirely different branch of human development? A civilization that developed advanced knowledge through different means? Instead of the European path of wheels and writing and conquest, what if they developed consciousness technologies? Plant medicines that allowed direct knowledge transmission, oral traditions that preserved information with greater accuracy than writing, spiritual practices that accessed information fields modern science is only beginning to discover. The monuments might not be primitive at all, but representations of advanced sacred geometry. The astronomical knowledge might come not from star teachers, but from thousands of years of unbroken observation, something impossible in Europe, with its constant wars and upheavals. DNA differences might indicate that Native Americans have been in the Americas far longer than the accepted 15,000 years. Long enough to develop unique adaptations, long enough to build civilizations that rose and fell before history began. What if everything you've been taught about human history is wrong? What if the Native Americans were the keepers of humanity's true history? What if in our rush to justify conquest, we destroyed the very knowledge that could have saved us? Look at where ignoring indigenous wisdom has brought us. Climate change, ecological collapse, spiritual emptiness. What if the primitive peoples we dismissed held the keys to sustainable civilization all along? What if your own DNA carries traces of this lost knowledge? Scientists now know that genetic memory is real, that trauma and experience can be passed down through generations. What memories lie dormant in your cells? What connection to the ancient wisdom have you been cut off from? Do you really know where you came from? Do you really know what humanity is capable of? Or have you been programmed to believe in limitations that don't exist? The mounds still stand, silent, waiting, holding secrets we're only beginning to uncover. The oral traditions continue, passed down by elders who remember what we've forgotten. The stars still wheel overhead in the patterns the ancestors tracked. The question isn't whether advanced Native American civilizations existed. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is, why were we told they didn't? What else have we been lied to about? And most importantly, what happens when humanity remembers its true history? The indigenous peoples of the world aren't relics of the past. They're the keepers of the future. They hold the memories we need to survive what's coming. Because the prophecies all agree, we're approaching another turning. Another time when the world will change overnight. Will we listen this time? Will we remember? Or will we dismiss the wisdom again and face the consequences alone? What do you believe? Are Native Americans the primitive peoples of your textbooks? Or are they the survivors of something magnificent, holding fragments of knowledge that could transform our understanding of what it means to be human? The truth is out there, buried in the mounds, written in the stars, carried in the blood, waiting for those brave enough to remember. The choice is yours. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you can't unknow. Welcome to the real history of the Americas. Welcome to the truth they never wanted you to find.